Hi everyone, my name is Marshall Condon and welcome to this episode of Finance is the New Black. In this episode, we're going to talk about negative gearing. We're also going to talk about comparison rates. First question, Cam.
Okay, we've got Dave from Hyatt. Dave's question is, what does negative gearing mean? And is living in the home the best approach to paying off the loan quicker?
Great question, Dave. It's a really topical question, obviously, with a lot that's going on in the media in terms of negative gearing. So in answer to your question, what negative gearing is essentially making a loss on an investment property. So if your rental doesn't cover all the costs of holding that property, so your interest, rates, water bills, all those sort of things, then and you make a loss, that's negative gearing. What happens is that loss then gets offset against the income that you earn from your job or wherever you earn your income from, and you're able to pay less tax that way. Now, a lot of people do buy property for negative gearing purposes, but in our eyes, we see this as a secondary benefit of buying property. And your primary benefit of buying property is to buy an asset that's going to grow in value and produce income for you in terms of rental when you do retire down the track. So, negative gearing is certainly important, and it's obviously something to chat to your accountant about in terms of how it's actually going to work out with your situation. But in terms of what it means for us is we actually believe it's a secondary towards the right asset selection and buying the property for what you should be buying it for, which is to make money. Now, if that means that you have to pay some tax along the way, the simple analogy is would you rather give me $1,000 and I'll give you $300 back, or would you rather have $1,000 and give me $300? You're usually better off by taking the money and paying some tax. So, with negative gearing, it's certainly a good thing to help with you obviously buying investment properties if you are buying and the costs are higher than what the expenses are. The rental it doesn't cover the costs, but it is certainly secondary towards the asset selection itself. Great question, Dave.
And for the second part of the question, is living in the home the best approach to paying off the loan quicker?
It's an interesting question because I think it certainly comes down to, we mentioned in a previous episode rent vesting in terms of the benefits of rent vesting, which basically means renting in an area you want to live in and buying where you can afford it and renting it out. Now, if you've already got the property and you're living in it, given that debt isn't necessarily going to be what we deem as good debt, which is deductible debt or debt against assets that increase in value, some people think it might be dead money. Not necessarily. If you do come up with a strategy and you start to budget and you put a cash flow together and you can start paying down that debt progressively, you're able to then use that debt again to potentially reinvest into investment assets. So, in terms of, you might be able to pay $10,000 or $20,000 off your mortgage this year. If you then convert that $20,000 into a new loan and use that for investment purposes, you're actually able to use the equity in your property to reinvest again and continue to grow your asset base. So, if you are in there, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It means that you've got an asset base, which is great. It means you're in the market, but it means that you'll need to start paying down that loan as quick as you can so you can build your equity and reinvest again. Great question, Dave. Question 2.
Okay, the second question is from Sebastian in Cremorne. What is a comparison rate? It always seems to be advertised differently to the advertised rate.
Great question, Sebastian. So the comparison rate is generally calculated on a $150,000 loan over 25 years. It may not necessarily reflect what your actual all-up rate will be. So what you do need to determine is when you're looking at a loan or a product, a good broker will go through what all the costs are in terms of that loan and that lender, in terms of what they're charging upfront and ongoing. Obviously the interest rate, you'll know what that is, and then you'll be able to work out based on what the repayments are and those ongoing costs, which is going to be the most competitive solution for you. So, a comparison rate is a guide to give you a rough idea of what the all-up rate with all the costs are, but it doesn't necessarily affect what's actually going to affect your loan and what you will be paying for yourself. Great question, Seb. We look forward to receiving your questions, and you can post your questions either on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, or you can private message us on Facebook. Send through your questions, and we look forward to answering them.